Okay. Good evening, everybody. It's Wednesday night, which is halacha and Tanya. Last week we had a Fabrengen instead of Tanya, but tonight we're going to go back to Tanya. Okay, we're middle of learning the laws of the after bracha, what's called bracha chreina. And we learned that in order to make an after bracha on food, you have to eat a certain amount, which is a kazayas, which is in our measurements 1 ounce. In order to make an after bracha after liquids, you need to have 3 ounces of liquid. We also learned that you have to eat it or drink it within a certain time frame, which is between 4 to 6 minutes. So if you're going to eat a 1 ounce of food, a kazayas, over a period of 10 minutes, you will not be able to make an after bracha. If you drink liquid, 3 ounces of liquid, and it's going to take you over 10 minutes to drink it, or 8 minutes to drink it, so then you cannot make an after bracha on it. So we learned you have to be careful when it comes to hot foods. Some poskim say even very cold foods that you can't eat a lot at one time, you'll get brain freeze. And it's going to take you longer than 7-8 minutes to eat it, so then you cannot make an after bracha. We also learned that according to certain opinions, a whole grape, a whole nut, a whole raisin in itself would demand an after bracha. So the halacha says it's better that don't eat 1 grape, 1 olive, unless if you make sure you're going to be eating a lot. But let's say somebody did have 1 grape. Bottom line, this we didn't discuss last time. What happens is, bottom line, you ate 1 grape. You do not make an after bracha on the grape, because many opinions say you cannot make an after bracha unless if you eat the proper amount. And we know the rule by brachas is that doubtful bracha you don't make, because then you might mention Hashem's name in vain. Another din we learned last week, just quickly, is that what happens if somebody had half an apple, half of candy, half a kazayas apple, half a kazayas of candy. The after bracha for both of them is very nefashis. So even though you only had a half an apple, half a pear, half a candy, half a whatever, that's shahako, nevertheless, you are able to make an after bracha, because bottom line is you ate a kazayas of that one particular food. But food and drink don't combine. So if somebody drank 2 ounces of liquid and a half an ounce of food, you cannot make an after bracha. Food and drink don't combine. Okay? Now, what happens if somebody eats a half a kazayas of cake, half a kazayas of apple, 1 after bracha? 1 after bracha is mezainis, 1 after bracha is very nefashis. You make the lesser of the bracha, so then you would make a very nefashis. Okay, that's where we're up to from last week. Okay, now what happens if somebody eats, and this is also could be a very practical thing. You're sitting down and you're having fruit. They serve you a fruit platter in front of you. Now on the fruit platter you have grapes, olives, apples, pears, watermelon, whatever. And you eat a lot of grapes. And you also eat an apple. Now, the after bracha on grapes is halachic valpriya. It's a special bracha. After bracha for apple is very nefashis. So the din is, because an apple also comes from a tree, so when you said the bracha al ha'etz valpriya on the grapes, dates, figs, pomegranates, olives, you don't have to make a very nefashis on the apple, because that's part of the bracha that you already said al ha'etz valpriya eitz. But what happens if you had meat? No, then you'd have to make a very nefashis. But because you're making a bracha on fruit, the special fruit, al ha'etz valpriya eitz, you do not need to make an after bracha on the apple. That's all included in that particular bracha. Now, what happens if somebody ate This happens a lot Shabbos by a kiddush. You ate cake and you drink wine. Okay, so what do you do then? In that bracha, you combine ala micha val kalkola, val hagefen val pri hagefen. You could combine those two things together. If you also ate grapes and olives, so then you'd say ala micha val kalkola, val hagefen val pri hagefen, val ha'etz val pri ha'etz, and you make it into one bracha. What happened? And the end of the bracha is also Baruch Atah Hashem ala oretz vala michya val pri hagofen v'haperes. Now, what happens if somebody at the beginning, they ate cake and grapes, okay, or cake and wine. Now, they're supposed to say at the beginning of the bracha, cake and wine. But what happens if they forgot to mention wine? At the beginning of the bracha, they only said, they forgot to mention the wine. They said, ala michya v'ala kalkola, and they forgot to say wine. But when they came to the end of the bracha, they remembered that they drank wine. So as long as at the end of the bracha, you say, Baruch Atah Hashem, ala oretz v'ala michya v'al pri hagofen, as long as you included it at the end of the bracha, even though you didn't say it at the beginning, it's valid. You do not have to repeat the bracha. But if somebody, let's say, had wine and grape and cake and wine, and they only made the after bracha on the cake, and they did not mention wine at all. They didn't mention the wine at all. They forgot from beginning to end. And they drank enough wine to demand an after bracha. They have to remake the bracha because they didn't say it. They only said on the cake, and they also have to say it on the wine. So normally, you're supposed to include it together at the beginning of the bracha and the end of the bracha. If you didn't include it at the beginning of the bracha, just at the end of the bracha, it's valid. You do not have to make a new bracha. If you didn't say it at all, then you have to make a new after bracha because you didn't say it at all. If you didn't take, let's say, only took a little bit of wine from Kiddush. Okay, you didn't drink 3 ounces. You do not make an after bracha on the wine because you didn't have enough. Now, let me tell you an interesting scenario with this, which is very common by a Kiddush. Okay, let's pick the scenario. Somebody makes Kiddush for everybody. He makes it very priyagofen. Our custom is people of themselves do not make their own very priyagofen. They heard the very priyagofen from the one making Kiddush. Okay? Now they're going to have cake. They have to make a very minimum. Now they're going to have a cup of juice, soda. Halachically, they do not need to make a bracha on that drink. We learned before, wine covers all drinks. So if I'm drinking wine and I make a very priyagofen, and then you drink any other liquid, I don't make a bracha on that. The liquid was included in the wine bracha. If I drank enough wine to make an after bracha, I don't make an after bracha on the other liquids either. All liquids are included in the first and end bracha very priyagofen and nalagefen. But what happens if I didn't drink enough wine, but I'm going to drink a cup of soda, a juice, tea, whatever? So it's interesting. On the juice, I'm not going to make a shahakol because the very priyagofen that I heard is going to cover the juice. But because I didn't drink enough wine, then I have to make an after bracha on the juice, even though I didn't make a bracha beforehand. So you have a lot of cases, you make a bracha before and not after. If you eat a little bit, you make a bracha, but you don't eat enough, you don't make a bracha afterwards. So many times you make a bracha before and not after. Sometimes it's technically possible, you make an after bracha, but you didn't make the bracha before. Why? You heard somebody else's very priyagofen. It's as if you made the bracha. That covers all liquids, but now you didn't drink enough wine to make an after bracha. So now you have to make a burden of cautious on the soda. Okay. Now, people, by the way, is very interesting. The Rebbe at the end of every Fabrenyan basically would say, remind people at the end, the Rebbe would announce at the end of Fabrenyan that whoever has to make an after bracha, don't forget to make an after bracha. And the fact is, we know in our human nature, before you're eating, you make a bracha. Everybody finishes eating, they get up and they forget about making an after bracha. It's very important to keep in mind, you have to make an after bracha, just like you have to make a bracha before. And children need to be taught, they have to make an after bracha. A lot of times, I was teaching in the high school, boys, girls, for a number of years. One day I'd be in an interesting mood. I would come into the classroom and turn to random kids and say Ala Michya by heart. Say Ala Michya by heart. They couldn't do it. I said to them, so how do you make an after bracha after you eat? They said, we look in the siddur. I say, Baba Meiser. If you keep making it after bracha from the siddur, you'd remember the bracha. Okay? I'll get to that question in a second. So therefore, people have to learn to make a bracha chreina because you don't always go get a siddur. You have to know bracha chreina. You need to know it. At least they always have a bencher to look in a siddur or something. It should be. Now, somebody just posed the question based on what we just said before. What happens if you eat grapes and banana? Then you have to make two separate brachas because banana is not bari pri ha'etz. The bracha, after bracha on grapes, you're using the word eitz, tree. The Shiva Saminim, the 7 species that Eretz Yisrael is praised with, the 5 of them fruits and the other ones are wheat and barley, mentions the word eitz. A banana doesn't come from an eitz. A banana is bari pri ha'adama. So therefore, you would have to make a separate bracha, bari nefashos on the banana. But it's a very good question. It could happen. You eat fruits. The same thing if somebody would eat watermelon and grapes. Okay, watermelon's also adama. It's not pre ha'etz. It's not from a tree. You make adama on a watermelon. So then the bracha you're making, the after bracha on grapes, dates, olive, pomegranates, and all that would not cover any vegetables or any fruits of the ground because you're not saying ha'etz. By the way, while we're on it, there's a very interesting question. The Rabbi Yosef discusses why is the bracha barei pri ha'adama and not barei pri ha'aretz? Land is aretz, adama is ground, really, earth. So he says, why do we make a bracha barei pri ha'adama and not barei pri ha'aretz? And he says, interestingly, because when you say Eretz, it refers to Eretz Yisrael. So when you say the bracha Barei Pri Haaretz, you would think it means fruits of Eretz Yisrael, which is not true. Eretz Yisrael is not praised with any fruits that grow from the ground directly. So the Rabbi Yosef says, the Chidah says, that's why you make it, call it Adama and not very pure H, because Adama is universal. Wherever it is around the world, the earth is called Adam. Okay, next. Okay, you're not allowed to leave until you make an after bracha in the proper place. You'll pardon pardon what I'm going to say now, but it could happen. What happens if somebody ate or drank and then they threw up? They vomited. You still make an after bracha. And the din is you don't, because the after bracha is on the benefit of the stomach. If you spit it up, you vomited or throw it up, so then your stomach didn't benefit it. In fact, there's another interesting question. Okay, it's gross, but just to bring out the point. What happens if somebody ate a half a kazayas, threw it up, and ate another half a kazayas? They also don't make an after bracha. Why? Because again, you don't have a whole kazayas, you don't have an ounce in your stomach, you have a half an ounce, because the other half, and some people disagree with that, but most poskim, Magen Avram, and that's the way the Alter Rebbe holds, that you don't make a bracha because the after bracha is basically on the benefit of the stomach. Some poskim disagree, and they say no, it's not on the stomach, it's on the eating, whatever. So that's a separate issue. Okay. Next, on fruits that grow from a tree, you make a barei priya. Fruits that grow from the ground is barei priya adam. Now, mushrooms grow on the ground, but the bracha on mushrooms is shahakol. Eat mushrooms, it's shahakol. Why? Because it doesn't nourish from the ground, it's only sitting on top of the ground. And the only time you make ha'adama is when the very pre-ha'adama has to be a fruit of the ground, meaning it's nourishing from the ground. Mushrooms nourish from the air, and therefore they only sit on the ground. So therefore you wouldn't make any ha'adama, you would make shahakol niya bidvari. Now, even certain things, it's very interesting. There's a big argument in halacha, what bracha do you make on a banana? Because the shaila is, what is the definition of a tree? What is the definition of a tree? You ever see a banana bush? It looks mamish like a tree. It's bigger than a vine of grapes. But the difference is, according to many opinions, that's the halacha. A banana tree, a definition of a tree in halacha is the same tree every year produces different fruits. I mean, more fruits, different, I mean, from the ones you took off. I don't mean different kind. Now, banana tree, they cut down the bush and they replant and it regrows. So according to that, it would be, a banana would be not ha'etz, but ha'adama. And in fact, that's the halacha. The halacha is that today we make a bracha on the banana, majority of poskim, that's the halacha. Today, on a banana, you make a barei priya adam. What bracha do you make on seaweed? What's it called? Seaweed. It seems that the bracha would be shahakol. It seems that the bracha would be shahakol. And even if it's a doubt or a machlekes, then if you make a shahakol anyway, you're covered. Now, let me explain another thing with fruits, and this is very relevant in practical brachas in cereals and things like this. Just because you have something that comes from vegetables, but if it's ground up and there's no pieces, the bracha is going to be shahakol. If there's still pieces, it's going to be ha'etz or adama, depending on this tree or ground. But if it's ground up, like I'll give you an example, potato starch, okay, which is potato flour that people make cakes on Pesach. A cake from potato flour is definitely not mezainis because it's not one of the 5 grains. It's not wheat, barley, oats, rye, and spelt. But even though it comes from a potato, you're not going to make a dam on such a cake because it's made into a flour. Once something is, if you make a smoothie, okay, you take strawberries and bananas, what else? Berries, what else? You do a whole bunch of things and you blend them together and now it's a liquid. The bracha is shahakol. apples. One second, let me just say one more thing. Okay, if it's orange juice, what bracha do you make on orange juice? Orange juice is a shahakol. But if there's pulp in the orange juice, now you have pieces of orange in the orange juice, then that orange juice is eights because you have pieces of orange in it. If there's no pulp, it's plain normal orange juice, no pulp, no pieces as the kids call it, then it's shahakol. If there's pieces. Now, for instance, it's very interesting then. What bracha do you make on applesauce? Applesauce, which is homemade, usually like people make for Pesach or the homemade applesauce or whatever. Usually there's pieces in it. Okay? So then applesauce would be ha'etz because there's pieces. What's very interesting is that Rabbi Reichik Sr. said that the previous Rebbe made shahakol even on blended applesauce, which is a very big chiddush, but he said he knows for sure that's what the Frierdiker Rebbe made ha'etz on applesauce. So by Chassidim, they make ha'etz on applesauce. But technically, in just halacha, if you have applesauce that's blended and there's no pieces, according to the rules of halacha, it should be a shahakol. If there's pieces, it's a eitz. Next din is you only make a bracha on something that you eat it the normal way of eating it. For instance, people don't eat raw potatoes, not yet at least. I know I had a friend that used to eat raw potatoes, but most people don't eat raw potatoes. Now, even though a potato grows from the ground, but if you don't eat it, but because it's not eaten raw, and somebody eats for whatever reason a piece of raw potato, the bracha is shahakol. The bracha would be shahakol. In Europe, people did not eat raw carrots. So if you look in Poskim, and it's interesting, the Soloveitchiks, till today, to my knowledge, make a shahakol on a raw carrot. Because in Europe, everybody ate what was called simis. They would eat cooked carrots. Nobody ate raw carrots. So then you'll find it earlier halacha that carrots would be a shahakol. Why? Because it wasn't eaten raw. If you ate it cooked, that's the normal way of eating it. So then you would make adama. Today in America, most people do eat raw carrots. So then the din is raw carrots would be adama. Cooked carrots would also be adama. If all of a sudden one day everybody wakes up and starts eating raw potatoes, then the bracha of a potato, raw potato, will become a very pure adama because that's the normal way of eating it. But if it's not the way of eating it, okay, you don't make a bracha on it only the way it's normally eaten. Okay? Like they say, okay, cabbage, Moshe, they used to pickle it. Pickling is like what's called Cabbage. They would soak it and pickle it, so to speak. That has a din of bishul. So let's say years ago, they didn't eat raw cabbage either. But they ate what they called crate. Crate was like pickled cabbage. So then the bracha would be ha'adama. Because again, you only make a bracha when it's the normal way of eating it. Sauerkraut is eaten raw today. So again, something eaten raw, you make adama. If it's not eaten raw, when you would eat it raw, then you'd make a shahak.
Rabbi, what bracha do you make on pickles?
Sour pickles?
Yeah, sour pickles.
I mean, then you make adama because they're cucumbers pickled.
So are cucumbers shahakol then, or
no? Raw cucumbers people eat today also.
Oh, that's true.
People eat raw cucumbers. People eat sour pickles or sour tomatoes or whatever. But these things are eaten also raw. So therefore, they're adama when they're eaten raw, and they're adama if they're cooked. What bracha do you make on mashed potatoes? So if there's pieces in the mashed potatoes, which there usually is, then you make a very adama on the mashed potatoes. But what happens if you use instant mashed potatoes that you powder and then you add liquid to it? Over there, if you look in the ingredients, it says dehydrated potatoes. Dehydrated potatoes is potato flour that you add water to. So then it would be a shahako. I'll give you another very common example. There's something called potato chips. Now, most potato chips are sliced potatoes very, very thin, and then they fry them. That's what potato chips are, right? So therefore, what bracha do you make? That's the normal way of eating it. So then on potato chips, you make adama. But there's a company called Pringles, to make sure they have a hechsher. Some of them they took off the hechsher from. But if you eat Pringles and you look at the ingredient says dehydrated potatoes. That's why Pringles are all exactly the same shape. You'll never find potato chips the same shape. Pringles are the same shape. Why? Because it's not sliced potatoes. They make it into a powder, like potato starch, potato flour, and then they put it into a mold and it makes the Pringles. So what bracha do you make on Pringles? On Pringles, you'd make a shahako. Because it's not potato chips. It's not potato. Dehydrated potatoes, dehydrated, whatever it may be, that's dehydrated, the bracha would be shahako. Because it's not the original fruit. If you have many of the cereals, you have rolled oats, would be ha'adama, because oats, the wheat, barley, that is only mezainis when it's made into a flour. Rolled oats is not flour, and therefore it would be ha'adama. If you have barley in a cholent, okay, or you cook barley and it doesn't mamish stick together that it becomes one, the bracha on barley would be ha'adama, not raw barley. Raw barley would be shahako because you can't eat raw barley. But if somebody cooks barley in a cholent, the cholent doesn't become a zainis because of the barley, because it's not floured, it's not made into a flour, and it's not stick together. But for instance, we'll finish with this. I'm not advertising any company, but Ezekiel bread, even though it says on the thing, flourless bread, they advertise it's flourless bread because it's sprouted. That means in simple English as follows. According to government regulations, it's not called flour. But the way it's made, and you speak to the mashgichim of the companies that make it, they will tell you the way it's made, halachically it's flour. Legally, it's flourless, because there's a certain definition in the FDA or whatever, what the definition of flour is. But according to halacha, according to most opinions, the way Ezekiel bread is made, even though it's flourless, is you have to make a meitzi on it. It's mamish bread. Initially, when Ezekiel bread came out, by the way, all the Rabbanim said it's shahako, it's flourless. The bread is shahako. Then they found out how it's made, and they said, no, it's not shahako, it's a mezainus. A meitzi. Because halachically it is. Okay, to be continued, let's go to Tanya, and let's get moving.
With hot liquids, so you don't make it after bracha, it's going to take more than 7 minutes, right?
Yeah, but 7 minutes, if you drink 3 ounces in 7 minutes, it could be in the middle, the beginning, or the end. As long as at one time, within 7 minutes, you drink 3 ounces, and you have to make an after bracha.
Then you can make it after then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Rabbi, if there's enough of the orange in orange juice pulp to be considered like solid to make a ha'etz, are you supposed to use the 1 ounce measurement for food or the 3 ounce measurement for the drink when you're considering the after
Well,
bracha?
you'll probably end up drinking 3 ounces of the juice. So you anyway would make the after bracha very nefashis. It wouldn't matter because even though the pulp is food and this is drink, but you're going to be drinking 3 ounces of orange juice. So you're going to have anyway the after bracha very nefashis. Okay, let's go to Tanya.